Huh?
You're not sharing screen.
I am.
No. Maybe people have started screen sharing. Then like, I don't see the.
Press.
Is it on Zoom? Okay.
Good? Okay.
What? Oh no, if you want to chat, that's okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll check, you know.
Okay.
What you show us?
No, she's asking if she's supposed to turn off both audio.
Yes. It's your face, isn't it? You want to rename yourself, so what do you rename?
What?
No.
How do I rename?
I can rename you or my.
Okay, right.
You need what?
Yes.
That's Alliance Française.
Yeah. How come on the screen it's showing the chat thing, but on mine it's not?
No, it pops out because it's a Zoom. It's still Zoom. That's why I say Zoom very ugly.
Oh. Yeah, it's too real.
So now you are Alliance Française de Singapour too.
What? A bit? What's this?
Sis,
No, it says you
what
are
is
screen
Huawei
sharing.
P20? Don't let me.
I think it could be Manuel's friend.
Do you ask for them to message you?
What if my laptop dies? I'm sorry.
Why? Don't say like that, lah. You now you got plug right?
What?
You're charging your laptop,
Then
right?
I told you. Oh, it's on mute, right?
No.
Um,
Cough.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Kobushi, a legacy talk tonight here at the Alliance Française. It is presented by Alliance Française Singapore as part of the French Excellence Program and organized with the support of the Fondation Le Corbusier in conjunction with the Archifest of the Singapore Institute of Architects. And then it is co-curated with SUTD, Architecture and Sustainable Design, RT+Q, and Group 8 Asia. It is also in partnership with Casina, Le Corbusier, BBC, Ombo Architecture, and Alex Posad. If time allows, there's a question and answer section at the end of the presentation by our presenters. So I would like to ask everyone to send the questions through the Alliance Française Facebook Messenger. So please start sending your questions now. So tonight we are joined by three speakers: Maria Boey, who is the master planner of Tampines and Pasir Ris towns; Rene Tan, director of RT+Q Architects; and then in Geneva, Manuel, the Hagopian, co-founder and partner of Group 8 Asia. So now let's hear from Maria. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Have the slides, please. I'm here to share the views of how I plan Tampines. And besides that, I've looked into Le Corbusier's work. As you know, he has been an architect, master planner, painter, sculptor, and author, and also an international speaker. And his work as an architect, he set up in 1911, and done 350 projects and 78 buildings in 12 countries. But the interesting part about his home, it is really elevated, and also to allow for column free so that there's ventilation. But the interesting part is about his roof garden, which is something that in Singapore we are doing a lot now. And of course, he has got very famous building. His plans are many, and algae, which is something that he has done, but it's adopted by other people as well. But the interesting part is Bogota, but unfortunately when I went there, I didn't get to see it. And it's about the linear wriggle of the subtropical landscape. Some of these buildings that you can see are very much towards the climate, which he uses in all his design and planning. This is another town that he has developed. Next. But the important part about his building is that he always has big spaces around the building, large parts used as foreground for his majestic buildings. I'm very impressed with some of his buildings, which is basically different in design, especially this pinwheel. And I found one in Toa Payoh, and we use it for public housing. This morning I went to look at the building, and it was the same building that the shape of the pinwheel. Although there are not that many adopted in Singapore, but it has got good views in all directions. This is a very impressive building. And if you look at it, the important thing is that he uses climate of the heat solar. And that's something that we adopt in Singapore because of the heat as well. And I recall that the PUB competition, we use a lot of it's a sunshade device. So that reminds me that we also adopt some of his ideas. but actually it is suitable for our climate. Next. Now, this is the type of public housing he was doing. Low-cost housing, but it's a very expensive one. And the interesting part of it is that he has research into garden city, which means the planting, especially streetscape along the street, and the resident has access to their private garden. Besides that, he was dealing with component of construction of buildings. It's something like we in Singapore, we progress with traditional and then back to precast housing. Next. I was very impressed with his interior design, and why I say so is because if you look at his balcony is used as part of the living space, whereas our balcony is encouraged to be like garden plots, and it'd be better if the people know how to use their balcony more as an extension of living space. I was also impressed with his design for the workers. You look at how beautiful the buildings, of course, they were rich industrialists who could provide costs of low housing, which is to us very beautiful houses. And the difference is that the workers are the cyclists. And back in Singapore now, we go encourage people to cycle. Next. The most important thing in planning of towns, and here Chandigarh is something that we look at the scheme and it's very interesting. Besides the streetscape, he has a right anchor to this sculpture of the hand. And in between, you have the town center, of course. And between that, you have green spaces linking together. So it says about the plan and how he would want it to be unique and built for the people. And I find him a loving husband and a loving son. He always writes letters to both of them. This is something that we architects should try to remember our parents. Chandigarh, this is his sketch, and part of them have been built already. I hope that we can go there one day and have a look at it next. So this is his sketches, very beautifully done and made into reality. Next. Of course, the construction, when he plot into the Chandigarh, he has plot of land identified for the workers, because at that time, the workers were traditional. And of course, his elevation at the ground floor is to provide for ventilation. So this was what he says. He designed for the Indians, although their cultural lifestyles and beliefs are different. But as human beings, we all have the basic needs of living in good accommodation. So this was one of the sculpture, the open hand, that is symbolic of the open ideas of humanity. Yes. Now let's go into Tampines, from concept to reality. When we plan Tampines, we are looking at a vision of 60,000 dwelling units, a regional center, and neighborhood centers, parks and neighborhood centers, commercial, industrial, institute, and infrastructure, of course. Yes. This structure is of planning structure model is done with Dr. Liu Title, one-to-one, myself and him. We went through the whole idea. And if you could recognize, Mr. Liu says that this structure itself is like a farm, you know, it's a tian, which is a square and a cross in between with the town center. And our neighborhood is divided into sub-centers, and we have distribution of housing, open spaces like schools, which are low-rise. And he was advocating a checkerboard pattern of how we can use a high-rise and low-rise so that we can divide out the high-rise and look as though we are with low-rise building. But because majority of our building are high-rise, when you go into a new town, we still cannot see so much of low-rise because there are so few of them. For example, the low-rise buildings are the neighborhood centers, the schools, and they are scattered into a checkerboard pattern. The new thing that we did here is that we link with green connectors. As MPark have park connectors along the river, we have green connectors linking neighborhood center to housing to schools. And that's how the inner square came about with the link of green network. Next. So there's a publication which details our planning and how you can see that the structural model is fit into Tampines. Of course, before we do anything, we look at the land, carve out what the government has, acquire some of those that is within that land that we need, and we restructured this structure model. At that period of time, the model was used for Nisun, Bukit Batok, Choa Chu Kang, and so we have done quite a few of the new towns with this structure model. But what is important in this structure model is that we also break down the monumental block by block building like in Tampines, in Bedok, whereby due to the climate, we put the building as north-south orientation. As the sun rises in the east and sets on the west, we avoid the in-between. So most of our buildings like in Bedok, even in Toa Payoh, were like blocks after blocks. And when we look at Tampines, we thought that we should try to reduce to low rise as much as possible, but it didn't work. The theory about high rise becoming low rise housing and how we use it was not possible to put everything down. So what we did is that we created a precinct concept with the internal space of a green space where the children playground is. As you can see above, that structure is no longer block by block orientation to northeast orientation. It's enclosing a space whereby the green connector goes right through from one housing precinct to another. So each housing precinct is 1,000 dwelling units. And we have the center core where it's very safe with landscape, the courtyards, and seats for the elderly. Next. So this is how we adopt the structure model. And within that, we have the hierarchy of open spaces, the town's park, the neighborhood park, the precinct open space, and we have the green connectors linking the town center to the neighborhood center, and from neighborhood to neighborhood, and to the schools and precinct centers. So you can see that number one is one of the housing in N8, and town center has become a regional center. And we have not completed construction yet because we believe in saving some for the future because there'll be changes in the environment in terms of the building. Next. So this is the design of the open spaces. At that time, that's the amount of work I've done. And here, the broad land use is that we use about 30% for housing, and the rest are parks. The infrastructure is always about 15%, which is very important. And our region center is part built up. Next. So when we talk about town master plan, of course, we have to plan and then submit to the ministry for approval. Besides that, the land settlement, the clearing of site, and the services coming in, and we have at the same time planned the neighborhood site plan with housing and the unit plan. We have many unit plans during my time when we started Tampines. We even have the Model A, which happened to be 10% more. So those lucky people who are living in this Model A has 10% of the floor area of the previous floor plan. So they were the very lucky one, which is very large. So then we have a lot of communal spaces whereby the community come together, have their own events in the open spaces. Because of our outdoor living, we can do a lot of function with these open spaces. And we involve the community. Next. So here itself is a smaller scale where every year I take people from the town center to walk through the neighborhood 8 and right down to the housing to the neighborhood center. And this is where you can now see, last time we have an outdoor stadium, indoor stadium, and green spaces. Now it has become the Tampines hub because we are lack of land and we multi-use our land area. So in the Tampines hub, we have sports complex, shopping mall, food center, and community center. And our World Habitat Award sculpture in 1992 is now in the link between the space from the Tampines hub to the Central Park. Next. So this is a Central Park whereby we have this green connector. This is a huge one because it's a neighborhood center. And you can see the high-rise and low-rise building of our precinct. Here itself, because this is a neighborhood center of fruit trees, remind us of Tampines as a fruit garden. Next. So this is a housing precinct. It's very well promoted in Singapore. Our newspaper keep in touch with HDB very well, and they always update us, but this is things of the past. We have so much more high density in Punggol. And now we are looking at new things that the higher it is, and also the roof garden we have implemented. So here itself, the neighborhood park, they call it the Central Park. So it reminds me of New York, you know, the people decide it should be called the Temple Central Park. Next. And of course, Corbusier always talk about the elevation at ground floor. And here in Singapore, it's a requirement that we have void deck at the ground floor. That was the slab block, we can do it. But now with all this point block, it's a bit hard to have much open spaces like what we have previously. Next. So this is a typical design of the neighborhood 2 housing with 5-room flats from 3-room, 4-room to 5-room. And they're put together into different areas. But the latest is that they have even the 1-room implemented, which is a good thing because we don't want the elderly to be isolated in one of their own single room. Yes. And of course, the community, the people, the member of parliament get involved very closely. Because we are not just building for the building's sake, we are building for the people. And that's why the member of parliament come to play together and promote the community spirit. And in Tampines, they are very, very high community spirit. Next. We also have a green plan of Tampines and a lot of cycling. In fact, it's the first cycling town, not planned by the government, but planned by the member of parliament together with the town council and the resident. So this is an approach we're going to, and we're still upgrading ourselves in promoting green and community activities. So this is my end. I had the publication that it was my work, but it's not a single work, it's a teamwork. The whole of HDB is involved in implementation. We have our engineers who work endlessly, our contract officers, and all the others, our junior especially. They did a lot of work. And 2 years after produced 10,000 units because it was peak of the period. And I went with my friend to look at the sculpture. And the building behind is, I work with Dr. Liu, and that is the town branch office. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing the ideas of the Corbusier and then bringing it to Tampines and then how you create towns and the importance of people. So now may we have Rene?
Thank you, Erwin, and it's very good to see everyone being here. And I'm going to speak on Le Corbusier from a little bit more of a biographical point. And I was very glad earlier to see Maria show the monument of the open hand, and I thought that it would be a good slide to start this talk with, because Le Corbusier saw it as the open hand as a symbol of reconciliation and peace for the world. And 50, 60 years on, we are here and still contemplating reconciliation and peace. I'd like to immediately acknowledge and thank this group of fire-breathing interns that we have in the office. We started this exhibition with 27 models, but if you count, there are 45 of them or 44 of them. So these folks had actually produced 17 new models in the space of 14 days. And I think that's a tremendous show of ambition and achievement. Next. We all know Le Corbusier is a very global architect, having built virtually in all continents. Next. And when I think back, I think of where I actually came to learn of Le Corbusier, and it has to be in the graduate school. Next. I had very good teachers when I was at Princeton in the late 80s. And at Princeton, people continue talking about Corbusier because he actually visited the campus with Einstein in 1946, I believe. And the discourse continues right through today. Next. But I think it was when I was at Syracuse as a young teacher that I actually got to know more about Le Corbusier. I was given a grant of about $5,000 in those days to go to Europe and see as much Le Corbusier as you can. If you don't come back. That was the implicit message. And it has become quite a journey for me personally. And I started counting and I realized that there are still 11 that I've yet to see. Next. It has become a bit of a personal journey and odyssey. And during vacations, Lara and I would go look for Le Corbusier buildings in the mornings, but the afternoons are reserved for shopping with Mama. Next. And it's really a wonderful experience seeing Le Corbusier in the world with a young kid, because it's she's always 2 steps ahead of me, discovering things and pointing out things that I would otherwise miss. Next. But today, I've got a new traveling companion, Erwin, right there. I've never seen anyone who's so in love with architecture. And he's been a great leader for not just me teaching at SUTD, but the students at large as well. Next. At SUTD, we conduct some design and traveling studios, history-based, where we look at works of the masters, try to understand its principles, and reuse them, apply them in contemporary design issues. And next, this is an interesting slide. We try to provide a broader interpretation of the architectural menu, so to speak. We start the students off with breakfast and champagne in Paris. Then we move along to Michelangelo and dinner in Florence. And mind you, dessert is also on the architectural syllabus. And for those students out there, parents are also invited. Next. We took the students to France, Paris in 2019, the year when the Notre Dame got burnt down. We brought them around. The idea was to see the works of Le Corbusier next. And just like the exhibition, daily routine, we seeked out where Le Corbusier used to live when he was a younger gentleman, and then right to his apartment during his later years. And we even took the students, we found this restaurant that he used to frequent, we were told. Next. The slide at the top left is worth taking a closer look. This is the Village Dine, and it was my 3rd time there, but this time we actually went in. And next. The students actually rang the doorbell, and unsuspectingly this lady showed up and asked us a few questions and actually let us in. And it was fascinating because we managed to see what the interior of the Village Dine was, although it's been renovated upon a few times, we are told. Next. We take the students through exercises. We looked at paintings and tried to get the young architects to understand the essence of Le Corbusier's lessons from a painterly point of view. Next. And with the information in hand, they would do some exercises, doing extensions to Le Corbusier buildings, respecting it and not destroying it. And at the end of the semester, they also, with whatever they have learned, try to reconstruct the roof of the Notre Dame. Next. Moving on, today I am a director of an architecture office in Singapore. And it continues to be a learning experience for me to continuously just handing down lessons. Next. We do all sorts of things, large and small buildings, all sorts of structures. We do things for people. We design for dogs and cats as well. And at the top left, we also recently have been designing for the dead. And the interesting thing is someone saw this slide just 2 days ago, and the left slide in the middle row, someone pointed out, oh, that looks like a tomb, a GCB, a good class bungalow, huge tomb. Next. Because of COVID, I think our approach towards sharing stories have changed, but nonetheless, we try to gather around meals. And because we can't travel, we look and talk about old photographs. Next. This is important. We have actually seen quite a lot of interesting things. One shone in snow. And of course, the ineffable space that the Corbusier himself would describe in his religious buildings. And one year, a few years back, we even took the office in terms of culture and experience to the Rubicon to see where Caesar actually crossed the river and changed the course of perhaps the Roman Empire. But we always left time for leisure and fun. Next. And this is important relative to the exhibition because for the past years, we have always gotten interns to do a Le Corbusier model as a tradition to get them acquainted with the works of the great master rather than spending time on a third-rate RT&Q work. Next. This is important every day when we talk about architecture. 3 reminders. Never think like an architect. And on the left, you see a rotating shoe cabinet. Think like a gambler. So if the wheel stops at Puma, you would wear Puma for the day. And trust on our counter intuition, a soft hedge as a gate. And the last thing I think is the most important thing. Never be afraid to put the right thing in the wrong place or vice versa. This slide here is a house we did in Bukit Timah. One day I show up. A few months later, I asked, what happened to that window at the bottom on the floor? And the husband and wife looked at each other and started blaming each other for becoming suddenly self-conscious in the shower. Next. These are some of the works that we do. We try to invoke a certain amount of interesting spaces. Never be afraid to put the wrong thing, like the bridge in this gallery space rather than artwork. We filled it with a couple of bridges. Next. Next. This is an interesting one because we thought we would put a vaulted ceiling, which is normally reserved for cathedrals and cardinals. Rather than leaving it at a church, we will put it in the wet kitchen where the helper works. And this one, we had to put the right thing in the right place because it was a house that was embedded into the hill and we needed to bring light into the basement. This one, we had to put the right thing in the right place, otherwise we would have been fired. Next. I kind of lost track of this as well. Next. Next. This is an interesting one too, a recent project. Every time we meet, every 2 weeks, the house gets smaller and smaller. Essentially, it didn't quite matter because I told the I told the client that while the house can change, while the fees are negotiable, the space and its essence is not. Next. I knew at some point this Villa Savoye slide would come in handy. This was a stage set we did for an opera a couple of years back. Next. This is the second last slide. Lately, we have been doing architecture for the dead. And what is interesting about it is, I think whatever we design for, the essence of space in architecture prevails. And there's a certain amount of spirituality, I think, whether, especially when designing for someone who's no longer actually there. Next. Yeah, this is the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rene, for taking us on a journey about your life. So it's very interesting. And so now from Singapore, we traveled to Geneva, Switzerland. We would like to bring you to Manuel. And Manuel is actually in Maison Claret. It's in Geneva, a work by the Kobushi. The model is here. It wasn't here a few days ago, but it was miraculously created by the student who's interning at Rene's studio. So now we would like to invite Manuel to share with us. Thank you, Manuel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. So as Erwin says, so I'm in Immeuble La Clarté in Geneva. It's a great pleasure to be able to do a talk in Le Corbusier building, especially when we're talking about his legacy. Today, I'm going to go through some kind of intimacy legacy quest somehow to find how Corbusier have impact architectures, world of architecture, but as well my world somehow. Excuse me if it's somehow a little bit personal, but at least I guess we will have understanding of how they have impact my practice here in Switzerland, Vietnam, and Singapore. So I will start to share my slide first. So first, just before I start, I just want to locate La Clarté, this building, built in 1932. It's an amazing building in different matters, but of course, you can see here the roof where almost all pitch roof, and there is a flat roof, roof garden here in La Clarté. It's amazing to see the contrast between the new and the old, and how this view can be captured within these architectures. When you see this picture, you can even think there is a problem somehow. Is the building a collage, or is the cars a collage? In a way that it's this connection between something so modern and something so old, actually. This building, this picture was taken in 1933 or 34, so it's quite early stage of the completion. You can see as well the other houses.
Manuel, maybe
yes.
If you could check, the slide is not showing, so if you could share the slide. Yeah,
sure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Here is okay?
No, not yet. We don't have it yet.
All right, so sorry. So let me check that. Why it doesn't work?
If you could maybe share the screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Here?
Yes, it's there. You have the slides, and now maybe you have to put them on full screen mode. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, here you are. So this is the early slide with the roof. And I was talking about this slide, about this contrast between the old and the new, and how those cars look so old, or this building so modern somehow. And then, of course, just to be clear and to clearly see where the name of La Clarté come from is, of course, the staircase done by glass blocks that you can see also on my, behind me. Those blocks have been industrial element that been used, and actually use it for the wall, but also for the step itself, bringing light from top to the ground floor. And yeah, so I will go now to this the question of the legacy of Corbusier, and as I said, somehow a very intimate interpretation or thought that I will share today. There's different type of architect, different type of people, of course. I'm always looking at people and at masters somehow. And I create some kind of idol box where I put all my idols from the early stage when I was young, and try to select actually and to clarify in my mind who are my masters. I never stopped to one masters, but I always try to re-question that who inspire me, who are genius, who are master, who have thought that goes beyond my capability somehow. And of course, Le Corbusier was one of the masters, and this is my first architect masters and idols that I follow from almost 30 years. Doesn't mean that it was the only architect master. I got a lot more after him, but he was the first one. And somehow he gave me a wall. As an architect, when you start, you don't have any idea why this building is better than the other, why this wall has to be curved or flat or straight. Very difficult to get this understanding as a student, actually. But somehow, Le Corbusier gave me this wall that I need behind me to start to look in front and to look to see forward and see, okay, this is right, this is wrong. Maybe re-question even his work somehow, but to have a base to start. And of course, back at that time, he was a great master already, passed away in 1965. So I discovered his first building in 1992. But this one is one of his work in Switzerland as well, is La Maison Le Lac, where he tried to capture the landscape and the beautiful panorama of the Alps as his living room. Somehow he became the garden of this small house, which is minuscule, but somehow it creates that grand effect, that grand capture of the landscape. The outside become inside, the inside become outside, with just one wall and one opening. But this opening give me a full possibility somehow. He start to help me to see that everything is possible and everything can be done with architecture. And the first building that I visit consciously, because of course, when I was living in Geneva, I passed by the Immeuble Clarté, but I never look at it as an architecture piece or as with the right eyes. Le Corbusier was always talking about the eyes who can see and the eyes doesn't see. So which eyes can see? And this building is the first time that I've seen architecture with the eyes of an architect. Is of course Ronchamp in 1955, complete in 1955, sorry. And I discovered that the machine of living, the machine habité, actually is also a machine of poetry. It's a machine that can generate emotion. And of course, this building is amazing in that sense. And I discovered the way that architecture is not only a technical questions, is an emotional question, and potentially is firstly emotional questions. And this crab shells poetic object found by Le Corbusier and reinterpreted as a roof bring some kind of full imagery. Can be a crab shell, of course, somehow, but at the same time can be a lot of things. And also you can see the towers, the lights of towers, that he creates that dialogue between poetic object, between mass, volume, under the sun. And he continued to play on the larger scale from the lower scale with the texture, with the materiality. Of course, brutalism was the trend back at that time, was the idea, was the direction for architect. So the material and the texture had been captured in a way that to showcase the true materiality of each element. Another thing that Le Corbusier give me or somehow transmit me is this idea of faith. The faith of your inner word and inner voice that give you the direction. And he gave me the direction in a way that it makes like very big, very large ideas. Not only to see a small ideas to say, okay, I can do this, I can do that, step by step. But Le Corbusier was always looking forward. He was looking very big. And in the early, even in the early stage of his career, he started to think about rebuilding Paris, to rebuild Bogota, Alger, other cities. And of course, Chandigarh was the perfect occasion for him. Nobody wants to build Chandigarh somehow because it was too fast. It was not well paid, of course. And he was able to come to jump into the project. And he was potentially the only person who wants to do it. And when you see this picture, you see different things. You see this mise en scène, of course, of him looking at the plan, the master plan of the new capitals, but at the same time, there is the modular. So this one is typically Le Corbusier. He got the plan, he got the ideas, he got plans for his career. Very early stage, he knew that he will be a great man, and he wants to be a great man. And everything he did was in purpose. He has this idea, this master plan of his career in his head. The plan is the base for him, from in to out, from inside to outside. So the plan was very clear. And when you see this mise en scène, he's always trying to bringing him to the visionary, the guys who are going to see further than you. That if you are in the same room than him, the thing is he has always ideas of the questions, an answer, which is a lot of confidence somehow. But he give these ideas of confidence and faith. And this master plan can be seen in all this construction. I've talked about poetics, about emotion, but doesn't mean that curve is only emotions. There is a lot of different matters, and it was very scientific somehow as well. Maybe to justify what he got as an intuition. And you can see that the modular and all this dimension scale that he generate was applied directly in his building. And you can see that there is a real structure ideas behind this picture of Chandigarh, of one of the building of Chandigarh. But at the same time, there is accident. There is a lot of life. Even if it's square, yes, it's square. Of course, it's organized. There is proportion. There is dimension. As a human, I guess we are better sit in a seat with 43 centimeter height than 47, and it's about that. It's about the height of each of human and how to generate a house, a machine of habitat for everyone. And the legacy cannot be seen only on the architecture point of view or what he bring me in terms of architecture, but also to look at his secret garden or secret studio. This poster is a poster that I display in 2019, sorry, end of 2019 in TB80, my studio in Tiong Bahru, Singapore. It was an original print of an exhibition in Zurich in 1937. It's the first time that Le Corbusier was showing actually or displaying arts and architecture in the same document. And it was very grand in the way that it's the first exhibition in Switzerland since he left. So it was very important for him in 1937, think that he got the confidence to showcase both together and saying that the guys who's doing these arts, doing also these architectures. And of course, there is opposition, there is a contrast between both elements, but at the same time, it's very easy to generate or to see the relation between his secret studio, which basically is his home in his studio, art studio in Paris, and his architecture studio in Paris. at Avenue de Sèvres. So there is two different faces of Le Corbusier. And in these posters, somehow he revealed the two faces of the person, of the artist. And this gravure, this royalty gravure, explains somehow these ideas, because you can see that there is something that he did in 1956, but actually there's few dates on these paintings, on this gravure, and there is different ideas behind it. We can see that somehow it's a matchbox that he destroyed, decompose it. He played a lot with this matchbox. This matchbox was in his studio, in architecture studio, next to his table, and play a lot with that. He liked this matchbox, but he can create fires with almost nothing, and that was something, his ideas of being primitive, to be primitive, to do fire. And he was always playing this with matchbox, and there is a lot of painting talking about this matchbox. And you can see that he played with this matchbox in 2 dimensions, but actually there's always space in his painting, always a 3-dimensional dimension. And you can see this 1930 is actually the date that he started to think about the matchbox, and it is almost his purest work in early years. And in 50s, actually, he took back these ideas and he generates these bells towers that he used for La Tourette monastery. So how the idea in 1930 finalized in a gravure in 1956, and finally at the end be built in La Tourette monastery. So that link is typically Le Corbusier link. He creates a story, his career, his legacy. He always talk about himself or his work as a reference. So he auto-referenced himself somehow with these dates. It's very obvious. And that creates really these ideas that he has a legacy is in own. He has these ideas to create. He has a plan for his work. And he always look at his work as a continuity. Even if there is different portion, there is different period, of course, for his painting, for his architecture, but he has these ideas of linking everything together. And these paintings showcase that ideas. And you can see in the exhibition, and this is very clear, this 5 periods that he works in his studio, these secret studios. From 1918 to 27, the purist work, this early work in Paris, when he used very domestic objects, work in 2D, flatten the different perspective in one painting, different perspective, creating this criticism of the cubism. In 1927 to 1931, the objects of poetic reactions, the ants, the shells, any branches that he can find become somehow inspiration for his work. Nature was his master somehow. He always referred to nature, even if he talk about dimension or any composition or proportion, always come back to the human scale, which is somehow the nature, of course, the nature of the human, looking at the nature of human. In 1932, 1940, the woman, of course, is a man, and the woman was always there, his mothers and his wife. So 2 women that be the continuity. Of course, there is also some discontinuity with different women, and he displayed in different matters. Very generous always. The curves are always generous, and you can see also the confidence of the lines in those drawings. the ants as well, again, in these central drawings. Almost all along his work, you can see ants. In 1942 to 1950, this one is the acoustic sculptures that he did in 2D, in painting, but also in sculpture with different people. And that always back to his work, and it was just before Renown. And Renown, of course, in itself is an acoustic sculpture. And you may see during in the exhibition as well some kind of space that, of course, reflect almost a sculpture atmosphere, and light is captures. And finally, 1952 and 1965, the bulls. It was always a fan of Picasso. It was his master in painting, the great masters. And the bulls came out a little bit early than 52, but he appears in his drawings. He described this in a beautiful text where he said, I was amazed, a bull in my drawings. How come? Of course, Picasso was there. Of course, Chandigarh was already starting. The bulls was, of course, linked to the Chandigarh work. And it appears to be his last period of painting. And this series is a series that he did in 1962. Again, he tried to recompose his life. He tried to relink his work. And that is definitely the idea is to leave a legacy. He did that in early stage with archive, with sketches. His sketches during his travels and everything was always planned to be published. He did a lot of books. He got these ideas that he has to leave something. And this is the legacy. And actually, I guess this text, which is almost again, somehow he anticipated his death and in 77 years old, he tried to recap what he did, how he did it, with what spirit. And that's amazing. Somehow he has always these ideas of doing things in a plan, a master plan for his work. This is my idol box. It's closed for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuel, for speaking about the legacy of Le Corbusier. It's a very interesting reading, which also somehow reflects about you also. I think it's very enlightening to hear that. I have questions. We have very limited time, so maybe I just ask one question to each of you, and if you could respond to it within a minute. So, Maria, which of the architectural projects you conducted that combine Le Corbusier architectural principles? Maybe if you could name one, and then can you say if you like Le Corbusier?
Actually, when we design with the text, our own local context. I'm not really influenced by any architect in that sense, because I just look at their work and appreciate their ability and creativity. But when I'm designing in Singapore, I look at our own environment, because you are designing for the people here, especially in public housing. We have rules that we have to follow. The economy of skills, the stage of construction at that time. We went through a very difficult construction period where we cannot find good contractors. We have laborers from Thailand who are farmers. And so we have this period whereby we have to think about how can we solve this problem. And when one of our ministers became realizing that we have to industrialize, we prefab and computerize. Despite the construction of failure of prefab in the early days, we carry on with much struggle with new contractors from Australia.
So you're saying, Maria, that design is about the context itself.
Yes,
it's
because
not necessarily
in HDB, it's very much a local context. Designing for the people, the lifestyle, the community, and of course, include the government policies.
Yes.
So that's why it's a bit difficult, but I think if we can be inspired, we can include some of the features, but I don't think architects like to just imitate. Architects like to create, and so it can be windshield, we can recreate that. As I said, our architects are also able to recognize what is good for the international architects, of which in Singapore, we invited a lot of international architects. A lot of us are influenced by that too. For example, the mega structure in Golden Mile Complex. All these are inspired by the period of time, postmodernism. All these are very inspiring work.
So you're saying that
but
usually,
in my case,
yeah.
I can't.
Okay.
Because of the local context.
Yes.
And I'm designing for the people of Singapore with government rules.
Okay, thank you. And so from there, maybe we go to Rene in his practice, because it's a practice. With the new normal, with the COVID situation, what are the changes that you have made in your practice? Are there changes that you've made in the practice?
That's a good, relevant question. Of course, we can't travel anymore, so that's a reality. And but it doesn't mean that we would close our minds to possibilities and the excitements of rediscovering things. We still talk about what we have seen. We try to reuse what we have visited. I think that's important. Apply things that what we normally would not have been able to do. And I think in our practice today, it gives us time to think a little bit more internally as a group as to what we may have missed and what we ought to be doing a little bit more. For myself, I try to use my hands a little bit more, sketch, and lately even paint. And I think that process has helped me and hopefully the rest of the team start to see things and discover things in different ways.
Thank you. Another question is, what will you do with the models after the exhibition?
Well, we're going to repair them because I see there's still room for improvement. So yeah, we will do that. And we have to, of course, find space to store them. The models are important because it's not just getting the younger folks, the interns, to spend time doing it, because it's also an opportunity for us, for me, including me, and maybe even especially me, to continue learning, looking at things and see where it may be applicable to the things we do on our daily basis.
Thank you. Manuel, you shared a very insightful evolution, maybe of Le Corbusier's legacy, and then the ideas he was exploring, the questions he was trying to answer. And so one question that came here is that, is the legacy of Le Corbusier intentionally crafted, or was it founded by a natural genius?
I guess of course, he has natural skills, definitely. But I guess he crafted his own legacy. For me, it's a daily work that he has done all along his life to create this legacy. He was very open-minded somehow, even if he was very sure about what he said and he has the answer for almost everything. I guess he did it. I mean, he crafted. For me, it's a long process. I can see it as a long process. And when you read the text, unfortunately, I just placed it in French, but if you read his last text, it's very clear that he talked about a long, patient work. It's not like coming from the sky and boom, it's a genius, everything is there. No, I don't think so. And that also give me hope somehow. To wake up every morning very early and to work. And I guess this is part of the legacy, actually.
I'm glad that you said that it gives you the hope when you wake up in the morning, because I was looking at your monograph also. And so I could somehow see also the thought and then the structure that you are trying to achieve in the projects that you do. We could see that in the projects that you do in Singapore also. Thank you. And so I think that we've had a good conversation, and I think the questions from the audience were quite good. And Maria, Rene, and Manuel, thank you for the wonderful sharing on the legacy of Le Corbusier. It was a question that was asked, and thank you everyone for being here to join us in the conversation.
Thank you very much.
I do every year a walk to Tampines. It starts from the MRT right to the neighborhood center and across the green spaces. So if you are interested, you can contact our people here, and then I will organize a walk. But now it's 2 by 2, so it's a bit difficult. I'll give you some notes first. Then can walk through the spaces.
Yeah, that's true. I think that Singapore is actually very fortunate in this pandemic because of the way it was planned, because of the open spaces, the green that Le Corbusier has imagined is actually somehow created in Singapore. So it gives that space for people to maybe live happily and healthier and play also. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, that was a good presentation, Maria.